Now it is the turn of Annette Peters with Cities and Communities Research for a Health-Promoting Environment.
So thank you very much. It's my pleasure to present to you research goal 2. So now I... Oh, it's work package 4, but I'm presenting research, but I need help to find the PowerPoint, I'm not a Mac person. No, but it's not.
Yes, yes, no problem.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh, no.
Okay, great. Many thanks. Sorry for that. So I'm presenting Research Goal 2, and I was chairing Work Package 4 together with Roel, and we will do this discussion together. But I would also like to acknowledge Manolis, who put together the Research Goal 2, and Anke and Franziska, who worked with us on Work Package 4, and then Audrey and Mark, who contributed to a HERA webinar which we had, and from whom I lent some of the pictures. So the cities we want to have inclusive and sustainable cities, and I think one of the challenges is that it not only should work for working people like us, but also for our children, as well as our aged citizens. And cities are basically have an urban form which guides what can be done in cities. And often this urban form is actually not for people or for health. It's for economy, it's for working, and it's also, if we preserve beauties of the past, it's the old buildings which were also for economy, for communication, and so forth. So it's when we then think about the exposures which are derived from this form, you have all these things which are listed there, including air pollution, noise, physical activity, and so forth. And we know we are studying and creating knowledge on how this impacts on health. But it's really the health which brings the to this urban form the human being. And so the research is really the research we need to know, and the knowledge and the solution we need to generate is really about how we change this urban form so that it's really for us as human beings, for the children as well as the old age. So this is why we constructed 6 research goals which are talking about the healthy urban environment, air pollutants, noise, changing the work environment, digitalization, and waste and contaminated sites. And I'm now bringing a few highlights out of the research agenda as we have formulated it. So one of the things, again, echoing before, we need to understand how we can translate the methods and approaches to reduce harmful exposures in urban environment. And we not only need to think about the urban inner cities, but the urban, suburban, and rural communities. And then, as was alluded before, we are now having these exposome work package or large consortia, but we really need to understand how we implement then the tools and how we can make the changes of this novel exposome tools we are deriving. And given that the urban form is so hard to change, I think it's important that if new quarters are constructed, we think about how this is really impacting healthy lives, increasing life expectancy, and is really helping the society as a whole and is sustainable and inclusive. It was alluded before that the WHO plays a major role, and one of the real very important steps last year was the launch of the new WHO air quality guidelines, which are extremely ambitious. And so we need research which kind of guides along the way from the current situation where pollution is way too high to really these very ambitious goals, which maybe you can achieve in Alaska or in very few places around the world currently. So how do we arrive there? And for that, we think we need measurements and better assessment of regulated and unregulated air contaminants. We need to focus on the children as one of the vulnerable populations and the whole life course, including in utero. And still, we need to also understand better the impact on aging-related diseases. And then echo what was said before, the climate change mitigation and zero air pollution action plan of the European community to say, well, how are we really quantifying the co-benefits? How can our knowledge help move the agenda forward? An important issue is and remains in our city noise. My hotel where I'm staying is really beautiful, but it has a ventilation system which ran the whole night, and to my mind, this disturbs me. So it's not just the city, the road in front of the hotel, which I did not have, though. I was in the backyard. So we need to advance the noise exposure assessment for health research. We need to understand by the environment, the health effects of environmental noise and the biological mechanisms in order to also, again, engage with our medical communities. Because if I cannot explain to the physician how it really works and why it's important as maybe their new drug, then I need to also explain how the mechanism is and explain it in their terms. Another area we identified is the changing work and employment conditions. So here on the map are the people who work overtime, more than 55 hours a week. So we are in a good situation, but nevertheless, this is a global problem, and also our size societies are diverse, and we have actually low social people with low socioeconomic status who really need to work very long hours, and this has been deteriorating now with the corona pandemic and the new easy access to many things. So we think that for work, it's climate change, key enabling technology, and the green and occupational health. So what does that all change in occupational health? The changing and the aging workforce, the work time and the changing employment patterns, and then use the novel technologies for monitoring, have electronic health records and surveillance in occupational health so that we do not forget about that. And actually, linked to that is very much the digitalization and the changing mobility patterns. And I don't know, when I was looking for a picture to conceptualize that, this is out of Koyaanisqatsi, the movie, which kind of from the 80s, which for the first time made visible how traffic is. And but this is also a picture which you could imagine as a data stream going through currents. So we think that health consequences related to the transformational change of work-life digitalization. So what is all happening to us, that we sit at home? So what does this make with society? How will our urban structures change? And how can we really understand this, and what do we need to do there? And the other point is, what are the environmental consequences of working at home and the e-commerce? Our cities, our European cities are dying. In Germany now, our shops close again at 7. It used to be being modern and American to have shops open to 20 or 21, to 8 or 9 in the evening. Now they're closing at 7 again, and you need to order online. And what does it do with us? A final thing which we often forget when we are more from the air pollution field, it's the waste and the contaminated sites, and a lot of issues around there. So we need to assess the health impacts of contaminated sites and identify targeted interventions. We have the whole issue of recycling and safe reuse of potentially containing toxic chemicals, so products which then contain the toxic chemicals. We have the whole business of wastewater and the consumption of chemicals for promotion of safety and sustainability by design and development of a circular economy, and what this means for health and the cities where actually most of this is happening. And then the planetary health approach to chemical risk with a focus on ecosystem and support for human health. So this is a picture which was also drawn as part of the HERA consortium, which really shows that all these issues are very much interlinked. We have the classical exposures. We want to create healthy cities in the future, and we need to acknowledge that our working life and the whole digitalization is an important aspect in there, and that maybe our cities will be looking different due to the changes we are currently experiencing. So, and now we have a small quiz. I'm now trying to need help again. So.
Yes.
Yeah, and so please go online, and now I think I need to, yeah, is that, yeah, and do I need to do anything for moving this on? Okay, good. Does it work? Okay. So we are testing who attended our webinar. Is it working? So the question, so it doesn't work. There are no cities coming up? Okay. Where is this? The question is, where is it? Yeah, so the options are... okay. So it's whether it's Berlin, whether it's Boston, whether it's Seoul, or whether it's Rotterdam. Okay, so whether you need this.
Ooh. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Man.
Okay, so I apologize for the inconvenience.
Okay.
So we simply, so unfortunately it's not Berlin because we have not changed our city so much. And it's also Boston had the big dig and really changed the roadways there. It's Seoul in Korea, which I found really amazing when I learned about it. And so to really see how they not only rise in East Asia, rise skyscrapers, but are also willing to change their cities. And I think this is an example for us, and Rotterdam is the city which is responding to the climate change and the potential level of sea rise, and therefore do a lot of city planning as well. And so with that, I'm ending my presentation. Roel and I are happy to take questions, and we hope that our future will look like that, and that the Rika had the question in the Mentimeter that 70% of our European citizens are living in cities should not be a threat. It should be a challenge to have healthy and sustainable cities. So we're happy to take questions. Roel?
Well, I have a comment and a question, and we can discuss that later in the general discussion very quickly. Perhaps I just say it and then we will have a discussion later. I think that what is missing in these presentations, and in yours in particular, is the forces of the market and business. Because, well, I don't know whether this might be the next step of HERA or not, but also business models that are attractive and advantageous for enterprises should be proposed, because otherwise, if we only stick to the forces of market, we will never change, or it is very difficult to have a quick change. But I don't want you to respond. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my question is that, I mean, in France at least, and probably in other countries, we have social problems in people living in rural areas. I mean, not in big cities. I mean, the Gilets jaunes, and you know, we have heard about that. And the other comment is that some people think that with the COVID and what happened, people are moving back to those areas and out of the cities. And so, do you think this will change? You know, something about, you know, the prospects of like saying that cities will include like 80% of the people or 70% of the people very soon. Is that trend going the opposite? You think, or not?
Yep. Does it work now? Yeah, it does. A difficult question, Robert. I mean, I think a few years ago we had the worries basically about neglected rural societies and actually not getting enough attention basically when we think about healthy living environments. I think with what all has happened in the last 2 years, with basically now the discussion about, I mean, city life versus urban life, I think there can be differences in basically preferences. But I think still, if you just think about where are most people in the world, where are most activities taking place, where is the most work, then still cities will still be basically the main nucleus. I just wanted to make a kind of disclaimer in a sense that this is about living environments with a focus on urban. But of course, rural is a very important aspect when we think from a One Health perspective, basically close proximity to agricultural activities, may that be zoonotic or may that be pesticides. It's also from a socioeconomic aspect, there are many things that are really important. So this presentation should not be taken basically that there is an exclusive focus on urban health. It's really important that we actually address both. And it's really interesting to see what happens in the future basically with mobility between those.
So it's actually a question for Paolo brought it up, but I think everyone should address it. What the pandemic has done is dramatically changed the market and how things are done dramatically. So the rise of e-commerce and how people are just not going to the stores anymore and buying everything online. So rapid change can happen if it's pushed. And maybe that's something we should be thinking about.
Absolutely. Question online? Yeah? Can you read it?
Question online. How can we engage stakeholders outside the environmental health sector?
Again, outside stakeholders outside the health sector?
The environmental health sector.
Other stakeholders outside, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is part of the, this was part of the diagram. And indeed, if you think of the urban form, it's actually not the health sector or defining the urban form. It's the many other stakeholders which define the urban form. And I think this is really the way forward. And as part of HERA, we had these other complex approaches like the energy market, which we now see with the war in the Ukraine as being so important. But it's really difficult to really pose the right research questions there. And this is also part of the white spaces, at least partially, we have identified.
Yeah, I think we showed a picture of a neighborhood in Utrecht that I'm involved in. And actually it's interesting because it has the ambition to be a very healthy neighborhood. That doesn't come from health researchers. It actually comes from the market that actually sees that there is a market for people that want to move into healthier neighborhoods. And so this actually project is just completely governed by market. We are involved basically to learn, and that's I think the most important thing that we wanted to stress about implementation research. There's a lot of plans being made, a lot of initiatives either by the private market or by the public sector to change living environments. Unfortunately, we often don't know exactly how those mitigation measures and plans are going to work out. Nobody developed ever a neighborhood to be unhealthy or a bad neighborhood. I mean, all the neighborhoods that we have in cities were planned with the best intent, basically. And so we actually have to understand basically how they actually develop over time, what really works under which circumstances. And that's something that we are clearly missing at this time, that we don't know exactly what these mitigation measures are going to be and how do we actually successfully implement it. That's not only scientifically, that is also about governance, that's also about financing, it's also about co-design with citizens.
I have two questions that I think need definition. First of all, I challenge what you just said, Raul. I'm not sure neighborhoods are always built to be the best. I think sometimes they're built to be the cheapest, to cause, you know, but the real question I have is I keep hearing the word stakeholders, and I'm not hearing it defined. And I think it may vary depending upon what you're talking about, but I really think that needs to be defined.
Can I propose to postpone this discussion to the final? No, because
absolutely, but I think
it is too big.
But right. But I mean, it's very hard, you know, to say, well, who are you talking about when you say stakeholders?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I suggest to move on, and the next presentation is by. No, it is not to cut.